Okay, we're recording.
Excellent. Good morning to everyone. Calling to order our Municipal Accountability Review Board for Thursday, September 9th. Great to see all of you here today. We have, I would say, a lighter agenda than what we're typically accustomed to, but it's a great opportunity for the municipalities to give us an update on where they're at from a financial perspective. And we have at least one contract that requires action for the city of Hartford. So we're going to begin today with our public comment period. I think we have at least one individual that likes to provide public comment. In order to do so, please unmute yourself. Please state your name and the city or town that you reside in, and please limit your remarks to 2 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to provide public comment?
Yes, my name is John Lewis. It's in regards to West Haven.
Okay, Ms. Lewis, you have the floor, and if everyone else could please mute, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Two quick questions. In the West Haven budget, we have used the ARPA funds received for COVID on the revenue side of the budget to balance the budget for the 2021-2022 budget. Are the ARPA funds allowed to be used to balance a budget? It's one question. And real quick, the second one, we also have salaried workers in West Haven who have received COVID funds. I believe they are exempt, according to the state of Connecticut, while receiving their regular salaries. Is that allowed? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. The public comment period is not to be used for questions and answers. However, we likely will touch upon ARPA as it relates to the city of West Haven's budget, and you'll likely hear answers to those questions if you stay on for West Hartford's portion of the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to participate in public comment today? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the approval of the minutes for July 8th, 2021. Is there a motion?
Sorry, can you not hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now. Sir, were you desiring to provide public comment?
Yes, if I may, just very, very quickly.
Very good.
The name is Daryl. The name is Daryl Cummings, and it is related to West Haven as well. There is an issue down here, and you're probably well aware that some information regarding what the last person said regarding the amounts paid by directors in the city. I've had to, unfortunately, look at and read the CARES Act more times than ever wanted in the last year. And it is extremely difficult to be able to find any allowances for the use of these monies to amass the amounts that have been received by members of the city of West Haven. There have been a number of significant models made by municipalities across the United States, not just in Connecticut, not just in New England, that specify by the legislative bodies how premium pay is calculated for the respective towns, how they grant monies to other organizations, nonprofits, businesses, individual, all of those allowable by ARPA funds, starting as far back as the middle of last year in 2020 for the CARES Act fund. If there is any way that you and the members of MARB can require the city of West Haven, which has been asked at city council meetings, to put together such a plan so there is transparency in regards to the spending of the money and the allowance that individuals within the public can see how it's spent and what the plans are without having to go through the FOIA. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on, is there anyone else that would like to provide public comment? Okay, very, very good. Then we are going to proceed with the approval of the July 8th minutes. And is there a motion?
So moved, Sal Luciano.
Thank you, Sal. A second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tom. Any discussion with respect to the minutes?
Yes, Secretary.
Yes, Kim?
I have one edit, please, that needs to take place on page 3 under section 5B. We need to change the title of Mr. Penn, and I have brought that to Julian's attention.
Thank you, Kim. Any other discussion pertaining to the minutes? All right, seeing none. Julian, over to you.
Yes, I'll go through the list of names here and just remember to unmute yourself when I come to your name. Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Waxenberg,
Aye.
Mr. Beller,
Yes.
Mr. Luciano,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Secretary McCaw.
Abstain.
Are there any other board members that have joined the meeting that I did not mention?
Matt Brockman,
And is that an aye, Matt?
that's an aye.
All right. So unless I missed anyone else, that's everybody.
Great, thank you, Julian. So our first up, after approval of minutes, is the Town of Sprague. We're going to start with a subcommittee update. We do have a written subcommittee update that was provided in the materials. And Julian's going to brief us quickly on the most recent subcommittee. Julian.
Yes, we did meet in July, and it was a relatively brief meeting. Really just primarily an opportunity to walk through the provisions of the ARPA funds, the amounts expected for the town of Sprague, some very preliminary conversation about where some of their priorities might lie, and then an update on some of the various financial management initiatives and projects currently underway. So there was the search for a new financial auditor, progress on the town's development of financial policies and procedures manual, and then other items related to their financial corrective action plan. And as I said, that was a relatively brief meeting, so that was the extent of our what we covered in July.
Great, thanks, Julian. Any questions or discussion on the Sprague subcommittee update? All right, then we will turn it over to the Town of Sprague to present us with the monthly financial reports for June and July of 2021.
Good morning. In your packages, you received reports for both June and July of 2021. June, we finished out the year just right about on budget. Those numbers have not been finalized because the books have not yet been closed out, but they're in the process of being done. And then as well, in July of 2021, we are right on target with everything. Taxes are a little bit higher, collections year over year, and that's because there was not a deferral in place this year compared to last year. So we're a little bit higher there. But we are right at our targeted amounts.
Thank you very much, First Selectwoman. Question, just wanted to have a reminder for the MARB as to whether or not residents were given the opportunity to defer or delay taxes for a period of time, and it seems like you still had a pretty strong collection rate in the town.
Yes, we did.
That's great. And then with respect to expenditures coming in a little bit lower, just curious on how you did with health claims. Did you find that claim trends were down as compared to prior years?
We don't really see the health claims. They go through the insurance, so we don't see that. But we didn't see a large increase in sick time or anything like that. So I would have to assume no.
Very good. Other questions or discussion on Sprague's financial report? are you able to give us a quick update on where you're projecting to be with respect to fund balance?
We do feel that there's going to be an increase, but we don't have a projected number yet. As it settles out, we think it's going to be better than we had projected in the 5-year plan. So we do think we're going to be in better shape than that, but we don't have a firm number yet.
And then also from a cash perspective, cash position still strong?
Yes, cash position is still strong. Yes.
Excellent. Any other questions on the Tom Spriggs financial report?
On the board side, I noticed that they have over $200,000 surplus, which is fine. My concern consistently, but is that special ed account. It's running over $800,000 in the red for last year, knowing it's a very, very erratic account due to the ins and outs of special education students. I guess my concern is there any way to get a handle on some degree of consistency so you don't see such fluctuations year after year. We've seen it year over year, which started the problem years ago, and I'm hopeful that they can somehow come up with a method to minimize that amount of fluctuation in that particular account, which would help greatly, I assume.
Michelle,
Can you hear me? This is
Oh, okay.
Kim. Can you hear me? Julian, can you hear me? This is Bill Hull, the superintendent.
Yes, Bill.
I'll answer that question. We are trying to stabilize that. The real problem has been move-ins, because we have quite a few apartments in town that we cannot account for. So this year, although we've seen an increase in special ed move-ins and also an increase in high school move-ins, we believe we're projecting to have a surplus of anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000. But the real problem that we have doing projections is the amount of special ed kids that have moved in, especially this year.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Any other questions for Sprague on their financial report?
I have one question, Madam.
Kim, over to you.
Bill, one question, Superintendent, is if I look at the FY21 detail, compare it to the overall report that came in from the town, it looks like yours is greater than the numbers that were put in for June 30th from the town's perspective. I'm assuming that the town just has not updated theirs and that I should be referring to your numbers.
I believe that's correct. The numbers that we closed out was we gave back to the town $219,000, almost $220,000.
That's fabulous, and that's greater than what you had projected the last time we met.
Right.
Yeah,
And
and once
Kim,
again, I'll just say it's better to be lucky than good. So.
And Kim, that is correct. It just has not been updated on our end.
Okay, thank you, First Selectman.
Thanks.
One other question, Bob White. What is driving the move-ins? I'm sure it's got something to do with the pandemic, but exactly how is that playing out?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a pandemic. It's just that when leases roll over, people sign in, do a lease, and we have to educate their kids. So it's just the amount of apartments that we have, especially in Baltic, which is part of Sprague.
And Bill, if I could interject on that, we do just have a very transient population. This has been an ongoing issue for as long as I can remember. So this is not pandemic related. It's just that we have people that move in and out, and it affects, who's the same student might be here in September, move out, and then back in May. It's very, very transient.
Thank you.
Other questions on Sprague's financial update today? All right, well, just for the record, you closed with a strong year. You're going to make a deposit to your fund balance, which will show some improvement in your stability. Your cash position is strong, and that was one of the initial issues that brought you to the MARB. So I think fiscal 21 shows strong progress, and congratulations on that to you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent. We're going to turn to the City of Hartford. First item for the city is a subcommittee update. Was an update that was provided in our materials that I will ask Julian to give us the highlights of. Julian?
Yes, we did meet in July, and the theme for July for all the municipalities was the ARPA funding, and we did get a presentation from the mayor on the city's plans for allocating those funds. The city's expecting about $112 million, and the city of Hartford is, compared to many other municipalities, is pretty far along in the planning process, and did go through a process of engaging with stakeholders and residents to get input on the plan. There is a snapshot of the plan, or at least in broad categories, and at a high level with amounts allocated to each that I did include in the write-up. But we did hear considerable more detail on that at the meeting, and then we went through in the city's budget mitigation plan, which is a series of steps that have been outlined for closing future projected budget gaps, and discuss some options there that the city has on the procurement side to perhaps leverage some state Department of Administrative Services programs and services. And that was those are the highlights.
Great, thanks, Julian. I would note that on the Mayor Bronin and the city's plan for use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, that almost $50 million is dedicated towards economic and community development. I had the privilege of learning a little bit more about the broader economic development vision that the mayor has set for the city, and I just want to give him an opportunity to talk about the importance of the economic and community development investment and his vision. It speaks to the goals and the approach that's being taken towards the city's long-term sustainability. So Mayor Bronin, if you will.
Thanks very much, Secretary McCaw. And as we talked about at some length in the committee, we tried to strike a balance in putting together our plan for the use of these ARP dollars between meeting those urgent, immediate needs of our community, everything from investing in supporting young people out of school and helping those youth providers that are doing critical work in our community, to investing in those organizations that are doing violence intervention work, to supporting small businesses as they recover. So a great deal of emphasis on the immediate needs, but also, as you say, a significant emphasis on trying to lay a stronger foundation so that we genuinely can come out of this and resume the growth that we had begun to see before we came into the pandemic. And that includes some investments that I would categorize as community investments, like library branches. It includes 2 libraries in the city's north end, a new library branch in the Swift factory and Barber Street in the northeast neighborhood, where a library branch is desperately needed, as well as saving a deteriorating historic building that's next to the Albany Avenue Library branch. That is that branch is consistently packed, overfilled during normal times, and we're anticipating that it's going to be back that way, and that we need it all the more as we help our kids recover in the wake of this pandemic. So those are 2 significant investments, but then also doing something that hasn't really been done before, which is investing directly through CRDA to help leverage additional private investment that will allow us to keep critical developments on track, including taking some city-owned buildings that we have had in our long-term plan to convert those city buildings to private ownership, get them back on the tax rolls. Examples of that are the old firehouse on Pearl Street in downtown, 525 Main Street, right across from City Hall. Both city-owned properties, non-performing, that through providing some of these resources as gap financing, we can get them back on the tax rolls. Also important investments to help continue to spur the growth in Parkville, as well as in our Northeast neighborhood, including some setting aside some funds for investment on Barber Street in our Northeast neighborhood, where we very much hope to be able to do something significant in the years ahead. So I'd be happy to talk more in detail about that. The one thing I would note is, as some of you, or maybe all of you probably know, there are some pretty strict restrictions on the ARP dollars and how they can be used for economic development. You'll hear from us in a minute that we were able to secure once again a surplus for FY22. That gives us the opportunity to shift those funding sources, to use our ARP dollars to cover the capital costs that we would have covered with those surplus dollars, and to use those surplus dollars to make general fund investments in economic development, which we might otherwise not have been able to do. So we're confident that our plan is consistent and from consistent with the guidelines, and that we will be in a strong position from a reporting standpoint, but we're also able to achieve some significant economic development goals that hopefully will make a difference in the long term.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions or discussion pertaining to the subcommittee update?
Yeah, this is Tom Hamilton. I have a question, Mayor. I'd like you to just comment briefly on sort of what percentage of this 112 million would you say is dedicated to non-recurring one-time expenses versus things that might be more in the realm of something that service would go away if the funding goes away. Obviously, 112 million is a sizable chunk of money, and my concern would be fiscal sustainability, making sure that you don't invest in building a lot of programs that all of a sudden 2 or 3 years down the road the funding goes away, and then you're sort of back where you started.
Sure. No, it's an important question, Tom. I have two answers. We're really not investing any of it in expanding city services. So city direct provision of city services. So it's not that we're going to be adding city positions that we then have to scale back. There are two very small exceptions to that I'm happy to talk about, but they're really not significant. There are, however, pretty sizable investments in community organizations that are providing services out there, whether it's our youth providers or our violence interrupters or some mental health initiatives, where it's absolutely true that we probably won't be able to sustain them at that same scale after this funding runs out. But I think we just went into it eyes wide open, recognizing that there is the reason we have this extraordinary infusion of resources, because we've just been through an extraordinarily disruptive time that has exacerbated the needs. And we have to accept the fact that we're going to have to bump up our services and do as much as we can right now to help our community come out of that and recover, help our kids and families and small businesses recover from that. And as much as we wish we could sustain it, we probably won't be able to. That said, the other piece that we're trying to do is build partnerships with other funders as we execute this plan, with the hope that some of it will be sustained through those partnerships. As an example, when we some of the funding that we invested in our violence intervention, we've leveraged many times by partnering with the Hartford Foundation and the Dalio Foundation. So we put in about we put in more than this, but for this particular partnership, we committed about $2 million, and we're able to leverage that into a $10 million commitment to some of that violence intervention work. If those programs are working and effective. I'm hopeful that those foundations will remain. That doesn't mean it won't have to be scaled back a little bit, but I'm hoping it will remain in place to some extent and allow us to continue that work. But again, it's just striking that balance of knowing that as much as we'd like to sustain it indefinitely, we've got an extraordinary level of need right now that we've got to meet.
Mayor Bronin, thank you for the updates. The review of the subcommittee or the update report makes reference to an ongoing reporting requirement to the U.S. Treasury. Can you comment briefly on what is being reported and why Hartford is among the subset of municipalities required to report?
I'm not sure I know what you're referring to.
I can probably take this one for you, Christine. So every municipality that received a direct allocation does have to periodically, it's pretty much quarterly, provide a report on the use of funds to Treasury. The state of Connecticut had to complete one for our $2.8 billion plan. And essentially what they're interested in is how are you intending to utilize the funds in a way that meets the eligibility terms that Treasury has laid out? What are the scope of services? Are we using evidence-based practices? How much has been obligated and how much has been spent? So the state completed that report. The municipalities had to complete it as well. And we probably should obtain a copy of our MARB municipalities report and have that available for you. Thanks very much. Other questions or discussion pertaining to the Hartford subcommittee update? I just have a quick follow-up question on the reporting requirement. Secretary McCaw, how many municipalities in our state have that ongoing reporting requirement? Christine, I'd have to go back and take a look and do some follow-up. So the larger municipalities receive direct allocations, and there's some portion of funds that OPM had to distribute. I believe they all have the reporting requirement, but I will confirm and follow back up with the committee.
If now that I apologize, I didn't understand the question. Thanks, Secretary McCaw, for taking it. But I think the answer to that is every municipality over 50,000, because every municipality over 50,000 got a direct allocation.
Thank you. Other discussion on the subcommittee update? All right, I want to make note and acknowledge that the MARB did receive a letter from a group of unions that independently had conducted an analysis of the state partnership plan. There's a request for some follow-up. We will share a copy of the letter and their analysis with the city and probably make a request for a comparable analysis to provide back to the MARB. As you know, the city has a number of contracts that have a different structure in the health plan. The substance of the letter was suggesting that there might be savings from pursuing the partnership plan, and we'll make sure that the city has a copy of that, and there'll be further follow-up at a later time in a MARB meeting.
Madam Secretary, can I just add to that? One of the concerns is that Seagull is usually used to make that comparison, but my understanding is that Seagull is the consultant that the Board of Ed is currently using. So just to prevent any conflict of interest, it might be helpful if somebody else takes a look at it rather than Seagull taking a look at themselves.
Thank you for the comments. We'll evaluate that. Obviously, there's probably a benefit to Seagull conducting the analysis because of their familiarity with the plan. But certainly we hear your concern and we'll take it offline and evaluate it further. All right, we're going to move on to the review, discussion, and possible action for the CHPIA contract, the Hartford Professional Employees Association. Contract expired June 30th, 2020. The city has entered into a tentative agreement for the period of July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2024. It's been signed by both parties. The union has ratified the contract, and the city council is expected to take action on September 13th. You will recall that MARB has the role of approving, rejecting, or taking no action. And if we choose to take action, we have until September 23rd to do so. Your package has a summary explanation of the contract provisions, a financial analysis, and some comps relative to other municipalities. And then we'll turn it over to the mayor or Jen to give us an overview of the contract.
Great. Thank you, Secretary McCaw. I'm not sure if we have either Marlene or Deb on the call to summarize, but Jen, do you want to summarize? I mean, let me just give a quick overview. This is an approach that we're trying to take to pretty much all of our contracts, is as much as possible to maintain status quo with some GWIs. As you know, we obtained very significant concessions in our last round of contracts on healthcare side, on pension side, and we don't think it's appropriate to do more than that to try to remain competitive. So most of our contracts can include, what we believe are modest and sustainable GWIs. This one includes that as well. If I'm not mistaken, this one includes a 2% GWI in the first year, followed by a 1% in the second, and then 2 zeros in the subsequent 2. That first 2% is paid retroactively because the contract ended a year ago. So you're talking about a 3% GWI over a 4-year period, which we would regard as quite modest. In addition, we did work to make some of our job classifications more competitive. And in particular, our public health nurse salary was an area where we really needed to bump that up to try to match the market. And so that was something that we accomplished in this contract as well. I'm happy to have Jen or anybody else in the team weigh in with more, or to take any of the questions that members of the committee have.
Good morning.
Jen? Good morning, Jen. Did you have anything more that you wanted to add today?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add was that this contract only covers 44 individuals within the general fund, and the analysis assumes that they're all full. All positions are full for the entire period of the contract, which isn't typically the case. So our analysis is definitely on the conservative side.
Thanks,
and
Jen.
it should also add that this is fully consistent with the 5-year plan that we provided to the MARB.
Great. So we'll open it up for discussion. So Mayor and Jen, it looks like from a GWI perspective, the contract only includes 3% over 4 years. Steps are included in all 4 years of the contract. So employees are progressing in their salary ranges. You've made some changes into a couple of areas where it sounds like you're having recruitment challenges. It looks like you also addressed the crime analyst and cyber information forensic specialist positions as well. From an overtime perspective, could you comment on why it was necessary to expand the eligibility for overtime to the members of this particular bargaining unit?
Sure. I mean, we previously had a 5% premium in lieu of overtime, and we felt that it was appropriate for a number of reasons, including fairness and competitiveness, to make this shift.
Very good. And it looks like there's a small adjustment on the health insurance premium going from 18.5% to 19%, resulting in some increased employee cost share.
That's correct.
Right. Great. And for the MARB board members' purpose, the overall increase in cost is approximately $110,000 fiscal 22 and $388,000 over the life of the contract. Other questions or discussion?
Quick question. I think I know the answer, but the cost analysis shows the yearly cost of steps going up, which is normally it would be going down as employees max out on step movement over the years. But it looks like while you had mentioned, the mayor had mentioned you move the salary on at least 3 of the positions. Is that the reason the cost increase on steps is going up each year?
Mr. Hamilton, we also added a step to the end of the contract, to the end of all of the positions.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, great. Thanks.
To follow up on Tom's comment, the GWIs obviously are within line, but in the future, could we have a GWI plus total cost? Because as you redo steps, adding steps, reconfiguring base salaries, et cetera, that could be a significant impact long term. So obviously the GWIs are within realm, but and understanding the need to reconfigure the salary structure to be competitive with surrounding communities, I understand. But just for future reference, when we do get contracts, if we could have the general wage, the GWI, and then in a separate, what's the total impact, that would be helpful.
We absolutely, Mark, we will do that. Just to note, the cost estimate that we provide is all in costs
Right.
of the contract.
Great. So Mark, you're just looking for it to be calculated to a percentage, and Julianne will follow up and make sure you have that after the meeting.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, questions, or comments on the Chapia contract that's before the board today?
Hearing none, a motion to approve is in order, I guess. So I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you,
Salviano.
Excellent. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, over to Julianne for a vote.
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Waxenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Biller,
Yes.
Mr. Luciano,
Yes.
Mr. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Brockman,
Yes.
Ms. Shaw,
Yes.
and Secretary McCaw.
Yes.
Are there any members of the board that joined that I did not mention? And that is everybody.
Excellent. All right, congratulations. Moving on to the monthly financial reports for June 2021 and July 2021, which you have in your meeting materials. The city's going to give us has provided an update on the preliminary fiscal 21 results, as well as the initial fiscal 2022 projections. I'll turn it over to maybe Jen. Do you want to walk us through the report for fiscal 21?
Secretary, I'll walk through the top level, and then as usual, Jen can dig in as much detail as the committee would like. The top level is, as we've presented our projections for the end of the year in our meetings, we've consistently said we're trying to remain conservative in those projections. Here we are taking recognizing savings that we have been hoping would be there, but we were not fully sure. So our change from our last update is favorability, a change of $10 million onto the FY 21 year-end report. So a total projection of $31 million favorability. The categories of favorability there's a number of them. There's not one big chunk. On the expense side, it's a decrease of about $7 million. That's $1 million of contingency, about $2 million on the health care side, which is again a savings that we fear will not be repeated in the future, but may be tied to the unique circumstance of COVID. Some underspend in relocation and workers' comp insurance, the workers' comp of $850 million. And then on the utilities side, we had less unfavorability than we had expected. So about $1 million of improvement from what we'd been projecting. And then on the revenue side, we had $3 million of improvement. There are a few different things here, but the biggest thing is actually the payment of the long past due police private duty costs at the Excel Center, which was built into the state budget, which we appreciate, and being able to take that liability off of our, be able to take that revenue and close that issue out, and also increase the favorability. Now, in terms of use of the surplus, we are planning to do two things, which we've all long talked about. One is continue to make contributions into our fund balance, and the other is to continue to make contributions into CIP. Now, I say that with the caveat, as mentioned earlier, that what we're actually going to be doing here is using some of these resources to fund that economic development work that we talked about in the context of the ARP plan, and then use those ARP dollars to make that CIP work possible. one thing I'd note on the CIP side is we're also, as part of that initiative, putting funds aside specifically for our school construction for a number of years ahead, so that we know that we are not taking on obligations that we can't cover, but that as our, school construction work continues, we've got a reserve set aside to ensure that we can fund that, not just now, but in the years ahead.
Thank you. Let's open it up for some discussion. So as we know, the issue with respect to the outstanding liability on police and private duty has been a long-standing one. So I'm thankful that we've been able to make progress on this particular item. Mayor, does this fully close out the outstanding balance that's owed to the city of Hartford from Excel?
From Excel, it does, yes.
Okay, excellent.
Jen, that's correct, right? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. And then I noticed that we had we outperformed projections of general property taxes, which is great. Is there anything that you can share? How the tax collection rate was consistent with the prior year, or anything that you can comment on how we achieved that?
Jen, you want to hit that? Or Leanne?
I might let Leanne take that if she's on.
Yeah, she's on.
I am on. Good morning, everyone. So the increase that we see in property taxes, part of it I think is just due to some repayment of prior year levy. We had a relatively large payment at the end of the fiscal year, close to $5 million. Also, further, we had just an overall increase in collections during the pandemic, which I think happened across the state, not just an incident that is related just to Hartford. So I don't know, we're counting our blessings here. And I can say that that collection trend on taxes has continued into fiscal 22. We are already 51% collected of our FY22 budget through August. So collections are just trending high.
Excellent. Excellent. And Leanne, what do you think you're going to close out for your tax collection rate for fiscal 21?
We did the collection, Secretary, it's a little over 96%.
Great. Is that favorable to the prior year?
Yes.
Great. Excellent. Can you just comment on the revenue from money and property? And it looks like there's an unfavorable variance. What is driving that?
Sure, Jen, you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take that one. That mainly is due to the interest rate being low.
Did we adjust it in the fiscal 22 budget?
Yes, we did.
Great. Excellent. All right. Other questions on the fiscal 21 projection? Okay. Anyone at this point then, if there are no other questions on fiscal 21, is there anything else that you want to report on pertaining to fiscal 22? Obviously, it's early and Leanne has indicated collections are very strong compared to prior year. So we're trending in the right direction. Anything else pertaining to fiscal 22 for Hartford? No. Okay. Mayor, one question for you. With respect to the $31 million surplus, is there some portion that you'll be putting into fund balance to grow your fund balance percentage, and then a portion for capital? Yeah, so we, at minimum, we'll be putting $5 million into fund balance, but I think we're hoping to put, I'm not committing this because we're still working through this, but I think we're looking to put around $8 million in. Great. Question? Which would be about 1.5% of budget. Kim?
Yes, madam. I had one comment that I really wanted to make regarding the ARPA funds and the fund balance. I really want to commend Hartford for the mayor and the finance staff For one, taking a look at the rules, regulations behind the ARPA funds, and also knowing that the restrictions are there, but knowing that you have a plan and being creative with the year-end results so that you can then maximize the funding as well as your fund balance. So I really want to commend you on looking at those restrictions, the compliance, and the use of those funds, but yet then looking at it as a whole and making sure that you maximize. So great job.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments? All right. We have 2 non-labor contracts for Hartford, Ambassador Wheelchair Services, Dial-A-Ride, which you have a summary document and a copy of the contract in your materials, as well as the Community Renewal Team for the Mckinney Homeless Shelter. We'll ask the city to provide a brief overview.
Great. Thanks, Secretary McCaw. I think I'm going to ask, I believe Carmen Chaparro from our HHS team will be presenting these. Carmen, over to you.
Hi, good morning, Secretary McCaw. Good morning, Mayor. And good morning to everyone. Nice to see everyone. So I will start with Dial-A-Ride and Ambassador Wheelchair Services, Inc. Ambassador Wheelchair Services participated in a competitive RFP process this past spring and won the bid. They will be providing Dial-A-Ride services to the elderly community here in Hartford, age 60 and over, 5 days a week, 6.5 hours a day, and they will be providing a total of 6 vans plus 1 backup vehicle, Monday through Friday. The services will include trips to medical services, trips to the grocery store, and trips back and forth to our senior centers here in the city. The total contract for FY22 is $761,618, of which $531,877 is from the general fund. And the remainder of those funds, the balance of that contract, is from an NCAA grant. Any questions regarding that particular contract?
Questions from the board?
Yes, curious to know an approximate estimate of the number of citizens served by this.
Thank you for that question. I actually do not have that in front of me. Clearly, our data varied a little bit. We can send that to you, Ms. Shaw. Last year, of course, was an anomaly, but we can definitely send over the 2020 and 2019 data that will help, that will give you an idea. Right now, I can tell you that for the last 2 months, ridership has been relatively, not at the same rate that it was pre-COVID. We have put some stipulations on, expectations of seniors entering and participating in our senior centers. So that is, that impacts it a little, but of the ridership that we do currently have, it's relatively consistent. Seniors, are definitely anxious to be out and about and engaging with their peers, particularly at the senior centers. But we can send that data over, right after this call. I just don't have it right in front of me, and I'm sorry for that, Michelle.
No worries. Thanks very much.
Carmen, if I recall correctly, some of the seniors also rely upon the Dial-A-Ride for things like going to the grocery store. Do you still see usage in that fashion coming out of the pandemic?
Yes, slowly. We haven't gotten the data quite yet. I'll check with our folks and see if we have the data for from April forward. I think it's been very slow in regards to that, but I will definitely check and see. I know that in July, when we opened up our senior centers, we saw a little bit more activity, so I can look and see what the ridership looks like for each service.
Great. And then finally, Carmen, does the contract value of $761,000, is that flat, or does it represent an increase over the prior year?
It's for dial-a-ride, it is, it's actually flat.
Very good. Good. And this is a new vendor?
This is a new vendor, yes.
All right. All right. Any other questions or discussion on the dial-a-ride contract?
One question, Madam.
Sure.
Do you also provide services for the seniors that if they're going to the community centers? Many of these community centers have been utilized for COVID vaccines. Are you assisting in that area too?
We've done, can you clarify a little bit by assisting?
Driving. So if somebody wanted to go get the vaccination and they're in a wheelchair, this is, I'm assuming that you can help people that can't get out of the house, that they can dial, and your service would then also take them to a senior center who could then be administering vaccinations.
I can jump on this, Kim. We have been, we've offered rides to vaccination sites to anybody who calls 311 to schedule, and we'll utilize, a variety of tools to get them there. If we can do it using dial-a-ride, given the hours and the sites, we'll do it. If we need to do it through our own transportation or through even an Uber and Lyft, we'll do that. We facilitate that with a variety of tools, but we have provided that service throughout the year.
Thank you, Mayor.
And a plug for vaccines, we are making house calls, so.
Wow.
Very good. Very good. I have to get creative. Any other questions on the dial-a-ride contract? All right. If not, we'll move on to the community renewal team, Mckinney Homeless Shelter contract renewal.
Okay. Great, thank you. So over the last now 18 months, Mckinney CRT has been operating their Mckinney Shelter Services from the Days Inn Motel. That was something that was put in place to help keep the clients socially distanced, really help them, keep safe from contracting COVID. And so the plan as of right now is for CRT to continue operating out of that facility. We have a $332,746 general fund contribution to Mckinney, and then the remainder of that contract, about $506,000 from Department of Housing, and another $26,000 from CDBG block grant that balance out that contract. The shelter serves homeless men ages 18 plus, primarily of African American and Latino descent, and they provide emergency shelter services. They also provide medical and behavioral services, and they help to increase access to other social support services, such as job readiness, etc. Because CRT, well, let me not go into that, but this contract did not get RFP'd. It went sole source because CRT is operating it out of that independent building, and there really wasn't any room for another vendor to come in and provide that service. So we did sole source this particular agreement this year.
Great. So Carmen, I hear you saying that with respect to not RFPing the contract, it's the unique relationship that CRT has played with the town, plus the fact that we are still coming out of the pandemic, and we understand that they're very familiar with the requirements for the isolation. They've been working with the state of Connecticut, Department of Housing, to ensure that the homeless population, their needs are being met in a way that is healthy and safe. Question for you on the value of the contract at 305. Is this a flat contract? I know the shelters have been indicating they need additional supports in the state.
So this is actually a slight increase of $15,000 from the previous year. We asked for that in when we submitted our budget, because we were generally coming in about $15,000 short for the last couple of years.
Great. Thank you. Questions or discussion on the McKinney homeless shelter contract?
I think it would be helpful also to get some data on this one in the population you serve.
Sure.
Great. Okay. Any other questions or requests for information? All right. That concludes everything we have for the city of Hartford. Thank you, Mayor. Good to see you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I
Mr.
can
West.
circle back to your previous comment regarding the letter that we got from president of the, I guess, the AFT.
Yes.
Couple concerns. Looking at that, I'd like to have Julian do. If you look at the population, right now, there are 8 contracts on the board side. I'm not talking about the city, and I don't intend to get involved in collective bargaining. On the board side, there are 8 contracts that are outstanding. 2 of them are 5 years old. They expired in 2017. That's a little outrageous in my mind, and 4 in 2018, et cetera. That said, some of them are on the health insurance side. Some of them are carrying PPOs for the existing personnel. Can Julian get from the board the population of the outstanding contracts, the numbers that are carrying the PPOs, and the numbers that are carrying the HSAs? Looking at some of the data that I've been provided, I understand that there's some HSAs that are now in place and PPOs have been grandfathered, et cetera, but it doesn't give us a number. So my concern is that for years, the insurance costs, people are in the PPO. We know the PPO is extraordinarily expensive, related either to the state partnership plan and or an HSA, whatever they bargain. So for years, they've been paying a premium, not only the employee, but the employer. So I'd like to get a handle on how many individuals are we talking about, and looking at the number that was provided to us, is it in the millions of dollars? That's just, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it's a little bit too far-fetched. And secondarily, sharing Sal's concern, I do agree that Siegel has background in municipal contracts, being formerly in municipal, deeply involved in municipal employee bargaining. There's about 4 or 5 that are heavily involved in municipal and or union broker advisors. On the municipal side, we are aware that they get broker fees, retention fees, et cetera. So the issue of conflict of interest, regardless of expertise, should be something that we should consider, and I'm sure you will. And there are qualified folks that have neither dog in any fight, that do not represent municipals and or employees, that could do the work for the state, for MARB, should we move forward to do an analysis on the board side like we did for West Haven. And I would encourage the secretary to consider that, so that there not be a cloud over whatever the data is that comes in to us. But, and lastly, is it my understanding from your comments that it is more than likely, if not likely, that we will engage in some sort of a consultancy with somebody similar to what we did with West Haven, to give us an idea to pass on to the board as to what are their best options regarding health insurance?
So Mark, number one, my comments earlier today were that we will do full due diligence. I mean, obviously the inquiry came in and suggested that there are opportunities for savings. That letter will be shared with the city, and we will ask them to evaluate the current cost of the HDHP relative to the state partnership plan, and to bring something back to the board. With respect to the concerns about the conflict of interest of Siegel, I am not going to comment today on that. Certainly it is appropriate. Siegel is under contract. This is in their scope of work to do for the city. If we believe it's necessary to get a separate independent analysis, we can certainly evaluate that at a later date. and take it from there. I think we're all committed, and I'm sure the city's committed to ensuring they can provide the best healthcare benefits for their employees in the most cost-effective manner. So I think our first step is to get the information and ask that the analysis be conducted. Now, with respect to the Board of Education, yes, we will ask for an update on where their contracts are, the status, the number of employees, which ones are PPO, which ones are high deductible health plans, and I presume not many at all have moved over to the state partnership, and we will bring this to subcommittee and discuss it further. If we think there's a need for a separate independent consultant, then we can have that discussion and take matters from there. But the inquiry came to the board. We want you to know that OPM will be taking the lead to share it with the city and to have the analysis conducted. So more to come on this. Your concern?
Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, with that, I think that concludes everything we have for the city of Hartford today. So thank you. And we're going to move on to the city of West Haven. First item is a subcommittee update. We have a written update in our materials. Julian's going to walk us through a quick summary. Over to you, Julian.
Yes, thank you. As was the case with the other municipalities, the bulk of the conversation at the West Haven Subcommittee's July meeting was around the, I'm sorry, before we got to the subject of ARPA, we did get a detailed update on the progress that the three fire districts have made in following up on recommendations that were included in the ESCI consultants report from a couple of years ago, including the creation of a tri-district commission, making improvements to the budgeting and financial forecasting process, budgeting greater amounts towards long-term liabilities, and one item that is in the planning phase now, which is a joint purchase for apparatus that would take place over several years and replace about a half a dozen large acquisitions for fire apparatus. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's a large number of items that were included in the report as recommendations that are still on the table and that will need to be pursued over the course of probably a multi-year effort. We will be getting a follow-up report on the district's progress at the next subcommittee meeting. One of the items we'll be looking at is their plans for contracting for pension investment advisory services. And as I started to say, we also talked about ARPA funding. The city is still at the very preliminary phases of planning for that. We talked about the funding eligibility and the restrictions that are in the interim rule around uses of the funding. West Haven is one of the communities that will be responsible for providing quarterly updating beginning on October. As a direct recipient of a portion of their funds, and they are also among the group that was required to submit a preliminary report in August as well, and that covers the highlights of our July subcommittee meeting.
You're on mute, Secretary.
You're on mute.
Thank you. So the subcommittee report did touch upon the use of ARPA funding, and I understand that the city is still working on a process to engage stakeholders or to solicit input from the public. We'll be looking forward to their further developments of their plan. As far as follow-up for the board, in light of some of the public commentary today, OPM will start to work with the city to understand the substance of those inquiries the extent to which how funds were used for premium pay or not, and what the funding source is. I will remind you that there have been two direct funding sources to municipalities during the pandemic. One was under the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and then there's the new American Rescue Plan Act fund. So step one will be to understand what funding source. If it is the CRF funding source, then there are reporting requirements to OPM because we're required to report to Treasury, and there is an upcoming reporting requirement. So we will have an opportunity to take a look at West Haven's use and whether or not it was consistent with the rules that were set forth by Treasury and the rules that came out from OPM. So further follow up on this particular item with respect to the public comment earlier today. For the next meeting, we'll have an update for you. Any other questions pertaining to the subcommittee report and update?
Hi, David Biller. I do have one question. So it appears that there was an interim report or preliminary report that it would have been due the Treasury in August, I think, per the subcommittee report. Is that something that's readily available for us now? Or is that
If
something
they
we'll
met,
eventually get?
we will make sure that you receive the interim reports for all three municipalities. It should have been already submitted, so therefore the report should be available. I see Frank nodding his head. And we'll just ask that as the report is submitted to Treasury, that Marb will also get a report and the quarterly reports as well. A copy should be sent over. We'll get that out to the board members.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Anything else on the subcommittee update? Okay. We have the monthly financial report for review and discussion for June 2021 and July 2021. Turn it over to Mayor Rossi or Mr. Saplinski to give us an update on the fiscal 21 results preliminarily.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I've included a preliminary view at where I think fiscal 21 is heading. There is some conservative assumptions in here regarding costs that have not come through yet. So I'm looking at roughly $1.5 million of surplus. This includes the $4 million of MARB restructuring funds, which drive to that. This also includes the $1.2 million of CRF funds that are in there. You can see that we're currently projecting just over $2 million of COVID expenses in fiscal 21 related to the city. That is not only purchases of hard materials, PP&E, cleaning supplies, etc. A good portion of that is overtime and wages related to the police department, the fire department, the town hall, public works, anyone who incurred overtime as a direct result of the COVID activities. That data is being compiled by Representative DeMassa here in the city. We expect this, and we encourage the auditors to make this part of their fiscal 21 audit to make sure that everything there is in compliance. So details are being pulled together for that. As far as the expenses go, or I should say the overall 1.5 million, the main drivers of that are, we had some favorability on the debt service side. The budget was put together with a conservative interest rate, so we saw a $500,000 savings in the debt service area. Because of COVID, we saw a very large savings in the elderly services line. There was a $300,000 budgeted for transportation. Because programs were canceled, that those contracts weren't needed, monies weren't spent, as well as parks and recreation programs being canceled. There was no need to hire the additional employees related to that. So we ended up seeing roughly $400,000 savings in both of those. These current numbers are showing a $600,000 savings to the healthcare line. Now, I do have a placeholder in there for additional costs. We have not seen the final true-up numbers yet for year end for the healthcare, for retirees and IBNR and activities that are not covered by the premiums, the employees that are on the state partnership plan. I have a placeholder in there for that. You'll see in the Allingtown fire, we expect to end up with $900,000 surplus there. A portion of that, $250,000, is capital spending that was put into the budget in fiscal 21 in anticipation of the purchase of a new fire truck. That purchase won't happen until 22. So when that does happen, the funding will come from their fund balance. The remainder, we're seeing favorability on their health care as well. Anecdotally, what I'm hearing is, again, throughout the pandemic, people were afraid to go out. They didn't want to go to doctor's offices. They didn't want to be exposed. So only the bare minimum happened. So we saw some savings there. On the sewer side, we're looking at just over $1 million surplus there. That's driven, they had a very large contingency number that was not used. We are seeing the capital outlays that they were expecting did not occur. So that is flowing through. I do have a placeholder in here for an additional, I believe it's $100,000 that I'm waiting to hear on utility costs. I'm hoping that, we're into September now, so I'm hoping that the sewer plant has submitted all of their utility costs through at least August, and so that these numbers are accurate. But there is a placeholder in there for that as well. So fiscal 21 looking like we should finish very favorably to budget.
Thank you, Frank. So first, starting off with respect to the $2 million in COVID expenses, I just want to make sure the public record is clear that the dollars that are reflected in this budget that came from the feds through OPM are the coronavirus relief funds. And with respect to use of funds towards salary-related expenses, the guidance does allow that employees who were in a public safety or public health role or were substantially dedicated to mitigating the pandemic, that those types of salary-related costs are eligible expenses. So I want to make sure that that's clear and is on the record. Obviously, through our reporting process, we will do a copious review and address some of the concerns that were raised by parties here today. Secondly, I see that you're projecting about $1.5 million surplus. So without the $4 million of MARB restructuring funds, we'd have a $2.5 million issue. It sounds like you're suggesting that the numbers could become more favorable. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The other thing I want to note for the board is that as a condition of receiving the $4 million in funding, or the up to $4 million in funding, there are a number of areas of compliance that West Haven had to meet. A couple that I will note is in the personnel area. You recall that we had a consultant report that was completed back in November 2019. The city was required to prepare a plan for implementing those recommendations. And OPM did advise the city to follow best practices, such as filling the vacant personnel director position. There's follow-up needed on this compliance item. The IT security plan still has some follow-up to address the vulnerabilities that were identified in the city's network or infrastructure. And that plan is supposed to indicate what investments were needed to address the findings in the Bloom-Shapiro report. We had compliance requirements for Munis training that was reflected in the October 2018 report by Bloom-Shapiro. And then there were corrective action plans pertaining to areas that came up in your financial audit that needed to be addressed. So I want to remind you that if this projection holds and you do need some of the funds that are under contract, we need you to meet the terms that are in that agreement in order for OPM to be able to release up a portion of those funds.
One clarifying note, Madam Secretary. Yes. I did reach out to Munis in regards to training. They are not conducting on-site training at the moment because of the pandemic. They did offer to do Zoom training, but I've not found that to be as effective when it comes to, kind of hands-on questions, et cetera. So what we are planning to do is I am going to schedule a call with them to see if we can at least get a 2-hour session with them between myself and Michael Milone, the purchasing director, and finance to at least determine what we need to do to make any off-site or remote training as efficient as possible. We do have computers set up. We ordered 6 laptops dedicated to training. They have been configured by the IT department. They are ready to go. The last time, as I understand it, Munis came in to do a quote-unquote training session. It was more of a lecture than a hands-on training, and so all of that knowledge that was passed on was lost. So these laptops were an investment to make sure that as the instructors are here, we can have hands-on experience, the people can actually do what they're supposed to do, and we can deal with any questions or issues as they arise.
Thanks for that, Frank. Obviously, Munis is 1 out of 4 other areas. So again, the idea here is we celebrate your success. You've made great progress from a financial perspective. Now we want to make sure your infrastructure allows you to continue it. So we ask that the city please complete those items so that you can close out the year as indicated in your financial report. Discussion or questions, Kim?
Could we please get an update on the vacant positions and the staffing? We did know that the HR director was planning to retire, and I believe there was another HR position. I do believe that there's also a financial accounts payable position that's vacant and that's been posted. There's a number of positions that have been pending. I would like to hear an update on that because that seems to be always a delayed reaction when it comes time to filling positions.
Can I talk to personnel? Yep. Kim, I'll start with the personnel and then Frank will take care of the finance department. We have sent a
Thank you, ma'am.
offer letter and the person, you can hear me okay, right? Okay.
Yes.
And we do have a candidate that is accepted. She will be starting in the 3rd week of October. She is highly credentialed, has 25 years of HR experience, is eager to start. And now we will be posting the job for the generalist because, again, I want that person to be in here in October as we had planned in the budget and planned with the review board. So we are, as far as personnel, they should be full staff in October. Frank, you'll take care of the finance.
And as far as finance goes, in the budget, we did have a senior accountant or chief accountant position. That position has been redefined. We have hired or we have a person in place now for a manager of accounting and financial planning. So this particular individual will oversee the budgeting process, the analysis process, as well as being supervisory to accounts payable and to our administrative function. The administrative position has been posted. I have been sent a list of the 2 candidates internally that had posted for it. I intend to set up an interview hopefully tomorrow if they are available so that we can get this desperately needed position filled. This position, as you may recall from the budget, will support accounts payable. It will support the purchasing department with the bids and activities there, as well as supporting filing and records maintenance for the grants department. So, moving forward with that, hopefully we'll be able to get that filled early next week. The accounts payable position, what we had wanted to do was actually, we redefined the position from an accounts payable clerk to an accounts payable analyst. We wanted an individual with an accounting degree, with the intention of actually, kind of beefing up the bench strength in finance. This individual would then be able to assist with the monthly closing process, with the audit process, with all accounting activities, reconciliations of the subledgers, et cetera. We have received pushback from the union. Even though it is a higher hourly wage position, there is significant pushback. They will not sign off on the position. I have not necessarily been given a reason why. So, at the moment, that position is not filled. One of my accountants is spending a part of her time doing accounts payable. The revenue collections individual is spending a piece of her time doing accounts payable each week. And I am probably the highest paid accounts payable person in the state, because I spend a part of my time every week dealing with accounts payable. So we are trying to work this through. My position is we desperately need to have the bench strength in finance. We have the opportunity with the position being vacated through a retirement, with a new purchasing position that has been filled. And that individual, by the way, is doing a fantastic job. Already pushing back on departments, already looking for synergies. With that position being filled, with the opportunity to fill a strong accounts payable accounting position, we have the opportunity to redefine processes within West Haven. So hopefully we can get the union to agree. As I said, I don't have anything in writing as to why this is being blocked, but that is where we are at the moment.
On the highest level, Madam, if we look at their expenditures and we take out their salaries and benefits section, it's leaving roughly somewhere in the vicinity of $40 million of expenditures that are going to run through an accounts payable clerk. I highly recommend that that position be elevated, and that a clerk level should not be holding a position such as this with the amount of volume and the complexities that West Haven is going to have in their budget for accounts payable, as well as reconciliations and accruals at the end of the year.
I might concur and recommend to the city that you pursue all avenues to get the appropriate skill set. Obviously, it's critical for you to be able to maintain the integrity of your general ledger and your financial system, and quite frankly, the progress that you've made here. We've been very focused on ensuring you have the right skill set and the right level of skill set throughout the organization. So we'll look forward to hearing your updates on what next steps need to be taken to ensure that the city is able to hire the skill set that's needed.
Thank you very much, Madam.
Yes, thank you.
My understanding is that management has the right to create jobs. Therefore, I'm not quite understanding why, whether or not the union's impediment to me is irrelevant. If it's a position that they choose to, if they choose to eliminate and create a position, then I would move forward in doing that at the utmost urgency, with the utmost urgency. And should there be legal action filed, that's why, unfortunately, they have legal counsel to defend them in that case. But being bogged down in the whether it's internal politics or whatever the case may be is only being injurious to the city of West Haven. So I would encourage them to move forward as hastily as possible. And I agree with Kim. Those positions need to be filled at the highest level.
This is Sal Luciano, and in my other job, I'm president of the AFL-CIO, and I don't know of any contract that would prevent management from a needed position and filling it. I'm very confused.
As am I, sir.
Yeah, we are too.
Thank you, Mark and Sal. Mayor and Frank, maybe we can do some follow-up offline to understand why the city is not proceeding, so we can make sure you're moving this forward.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, and I agree also because we do, we do desperately need this position.
Other discussion?
It is not our benefit for Frank to be doing accounts payable.
No, although he's good at it, it's not.
I will say this, though, is that since we've been doing it for the last 5 or 6 weeks, we have found gaps in the process that were being handled kind of offline by our previous accounts payable person rather than getting it fixed at the source. So that has been, a good thing from a process improvement perspective. We've been able to stem the tide of some of the bad habits.
Sometimes stepping down, you don't always uncover those areas of weakness that you need to improve. So that's one benefit, but we support you in getting someone in there, Frank, so we can maximize your talents.
I thank you.
I do have one other question, Madam, concerning the FY21 financials, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
The Board of Ed, Frank, I don't see that we have any kind of update in here from the Board of Ed as far as the year end, and I can see that the variance is still in line with being what it was in the prior reportings, which was only about 145,000. However, your year-to-date June 30th numbers right now, and I'm assuming you're still going through the year-end process, is showing about close to almost a $9 million savings from actuals to where you're projecting the end of the year. So do I assume that a lot of year-end numbers still haven't been completed for the Board of Ed, or are we just not up to date with their numbers?
Kim,
It's
Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Go ahead, Matt.
The huge piece that's missing is our 10-month summer payroll accrual. ADP is still building that template for me to use. I have a call with them at 1 o'clock today. Hopefully it is finalized, but that is the huge driver as why there's a $9 million delta.
Do you have any kind of, offline, did you do a calculation and that's where you think the 9 million is going to fill this gap?
Yeah, all our numbers are accounted for, and we do hold true to the $145,000 surplus at the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
Other discussion?
Secretary McCaw, could I be heard for a couple minutes?
Absolutely, Mayor.
Okay, one, I just wanted to state, because I know there were 2 speakers about the CARES Act funding, and we have done everything by the book. We follow what we're supposed to. We don't want any problems, and we welcome any and all auditing inquiries, whatever anybody wants to be to satisfy it. Books are open. I also want to point out, for a point of clarification, the 2 speakers, one is a candidate in the primary on Tuesday, and the other one is his friend, just for full disclosure. Other good news we have, and I don't know if anyone on the MAR board knows this, but S&P raised our bond rating outlook from stable to positive. So we are very excited about that. We know they put all very nice comments in along with it, that we are moving in the right direction, and and of course credit is given to MAR because credit should be given to MAR, but credit is given to us as well because we are outperforming. So I wanted to make the MAR members aware of that good news because we're very, very excited about it.
Mayor, that's incredible. Congratulations to you and to your team, to Frank, who's been outstanding, and Michael, your support. There's nothing like getting the report card from the rating agents and recognizing the progress that the city's made. But between the rating agencies and your financial auditors, certainly those are the true report cards. So congratulations to you on that, and we will continue to work with you with respect to the FOI complaints, the question on use of funds, and the complaint to the AG. And we'll ensure that both the city and the state will do our respective due diligence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other congratulations from the MAR board? I know that many of you have been at this for quite some time, so we join in this success with Mayor Rassi and her team.
Not so much congratulations as much as going back to the board budget. seeing how Matt's online. The transition to the state partnership plan based on the data that Marb did as for the cost savings, where are you in that process of migrating your employees to the state partnership plan?
Mr. Waxenberg, we started the state partnership plan July 1, so they've been in for 2 months.
And we're talking about all the bargaining units or all the individuals, I assume?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you.
Other discussion? Okay, we do not have any other business. So with that, thank you all for joining today. And
Motion to adjourn, Sal Luciano.
thank you, Sal. I can depend on you always, sir. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Julian's going to officially have us vote out to make sure we follow all procedures. So over to you, and thank you all.
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Waxenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Biller.
Yes, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Mr. Luciano.
Yes, and be safe.
Thank you. Tom already left the meeting. Mr. Brockman.
Yeah.
And Secretary McCaw.
Yes, indeed. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Bye.
Have a
You
good
too.
day.